Ford concentrated on the entire picture at all times, never on a single day's work. There was not a dolly or a boom shot in the entire picture. Occasionally, for the sake of composition or to accommodate the action, the camera would make a slight pan or tilt, but the mechanics of a roving camera never became noticeable. Those are words from cinematographer Arthur C. Miller on his work on John Ford's 1941 film, How Green Was My Valley. Scene Pieces and Movies is a podcast where each month I focus on the works of a different director or cinematographer. And each week I invite a guest on to discuss a film and the artist's filmography. I'm your host, Felicia, and today we're talking about How Green Is My Valley. So a very quick synopsis of the film is, at the turn of the century in a Welsh mining village, the Morgans, he stern, she gentle, raise coal mining sons and hope their youngest will find a better life. Tagline for the film is, rich is their humor, deep are their passions, reckless are their lives, mighty is their story. The film stars Walter Pidgeon as Mr. Griffith, Maureen O'Hara as Angharad Morgan, Anna Lee as Bronwyn, Donald Crisp as Mr. Willem Morgan, and Roddy McDowall as Hugh Morgan. It's written by Philip Dunn, based on the novel by Richard Llewellyn, cinematography by Arthur C. Miller, directed by John Ford, edited by James B. Clark, music by Alfred Newman, and costumes by Gwen Wakelin. Today, I have rejoining with me Bryan from the podcast What a Picture. And if you're a listener of this podcast, you should recognize his name because he's been on the show. Now this is his fourth time. So his first was we did All the President's Men, which is during the Gordon Willis series. Then he came back on for I Was Born, But that's an Ozu film, and still to this date, the only silent film I've done, and I would love to do another one. And then you also came on for Miracle in Milan, which is De Sica. And now you're back on for a fourth. So we're covering a huge wealth of film history, I would say. So I'm glad to have you back on, Bryan. Thank you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So, like I mentioned, you are a co-host from What a Picture podcast, which is on a little break right now, but you have such a huge wealth of amazing episodes that are there for everyone to listen to. So I highly recommend doing that and going back and picking out films you have seen or films that you haven't seen, and are like, I'd like to listen to this episode, so you got to watch it, which is my favorite thing to do when I'm following a podcast. But you also are a writer at Screen Age Wasteland, and you also do a film screening in your town of
Knoxville. Yeah, Knoxville, Tennessee.
I would love to hear about both of those projects, because I'm a big fan of Raf and his work at Screen Age Wasteland, but I'd also love to hear about the film screenings and how that even came about. So I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah. So for Screen Age, I've been writing film reviews. They're very kind and let me write about whatever I feel like writing about, which is sort of fun. But mostly been reviewing new films, so new releases. I'll sort of go and see and cover when I can. And so that's been really fun because I'd gotten started in podcasting, which is very sort of live impressions, informal. And so actually like sitting down and structuring something and revising and really getting to your point is sort of a different way of thinking about film. And so I've really enjoyed going through that process. And yeah, I've reviewed a bunch of this year's releases, primarily, stuff that's come out of festivals or just things that I'm interested in. And then the screening series is called Chroma Knock, and that started back this past March with a friend of mine who had this idea for screening experimental and art house film for free in Knoxville. So we got, a projector and a screen. There's a an Episcopal church in town that lets us use their space for free, which is incredible. So we've got this just beautiful building to show films in, and we've been doing that about twice a month. And so that has been really, really interesting as well, looking at films more from a curating perspective versus thinking
Mhm.
entirely critically, or what is my enjoyment of this versus what are other people going to enjoy, and how can I be a part of sort of expanding. I think a lot of the people who come are interested and open in experimental and art house film, but it may be a little different than what they're typically watching. So, how do you take them
Mhm.
on a journey and sort of show them different types of films than they're used to in a way that sort of opens up the world of, okay, this is what film can be. So that's been really, really fun to do as well. So I've been enjoying the current projects.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I am so jealous. I would love to be because you're a film programmer.
Mhm.
And I think that's such a fantastic thing to be to share films with others. And I'm curious, do you and your co-host do introductions prior to the film?
We do, yeah. So we'll
Okay.
talk maybe 5 minutes and
Mhm.
try to, for some of the films, we're sort of trying to ease in or introduce people for how to approach something that, I mean, we've done some stuff that's more non-narrative and imagery focused. And so trying to preface that with, okay, this is what you're watching. And so if you're trying really hard to just like follow a plot, that's, you're going to
Yeah.
sort of miss it, you know? And we've done some slow cinema that requires a different approach. It's much different pace than what we're used to. So we do intro them. We always do a short film and a feature film. And so we'll
Nice.
talk through why we chose the films to pair with each other and what they bring out in each other. So it's been really fun. So yeah, we do intro the films, and we'll sort of switch off who's introing based on who chose the film. We've been doing 2 screenings a month, so we sort of each choose one for the month and intro the ones that we chose.
No, that's great. Very happy for you. That sounds like a good time. It feels like you're keeping busy, that's for sure, which is
Yeah.
good. It's too good type of busy.
It is, yeah. It hasn't been too overwhelming in terms of schedule. That's just sort of every other Thursday. There's a little bit of prep and
Yeah.
promotion type of stuff, or we're playing in different things and trying to stay organized and grow the screening series. So it does take a little bit of time, but the time hasn't been, involvement hasn't been too intense on that. And then
Mhm.
I can sort of engage with the film reviews as I feel like it. So it never feels too overwhelming of like having a whole lot of obligation towards any of this stuff. It's all just stuff that I really enjoy. So that's been really nice.
I'm very, very glad to hear that. So, I think that's a good kind of segue to who we're talking about today, because this is a person in film who also kinda started off because you're talking about how you have your own projector and are screening films and, a church that is allowing you to do that feels very DIY, and Arthur
Hmm.
Miller started off very much and that. I the first episode that we'll screen of the series is on Dragonwyck, and I give a little bit more history. It'll kinda come up in this too, but Arthur C. Miller started off as, like, 14-year-old in the business. He worked for some filmmakers who were kinda doing also DIY work, and he was essentially doing bootlegs, like very early versions of bootleg films to be sold off, and then he got with Balshofer, who is a director cinematographer, who definitely is not a name that people know now as much as Miller is, even though Miller is still not a huge name. He gave him the opportunity to start actually shooting films, and that's how he learned. So he's been working since he was a teenager, and that's why he has a huge filmography, but I am curious what films of his that you've seen that at least stand out to you.
So I've seen four of his films. I watched Manhunt in the weeks leading up to recording this because I knew we were going to be talking about him, and it sounded like a good time to watch a Fritz Lang film. It's always a good time
Mhm,
to watch a Fritz Lang film. Prior to that, I'd seen this one that we're talking about today, How Green Is My Valley. I've, of course, seen
mhm.
The Oxbow Incident, which is incredible, and The Gunfighter as well. Yeah.
Nice, okay.
So a couple
So
of the
2 of his
westerns. Yeah.
westerns, yes,
Yep.
okay. No, that's great. I unfortunately didn't manage to get Oxbow Incident into this series, but I do want to do it at some point because I think that that film is super, super underrated. And I
Mm.
think it's such a great film. And then The Gunfighter I will be doing in this because it's just one of my favorite westerns. And any excuse to watch Gregory Peck, I'm down for. But
Yeah, he's great in that film.
he very much is. I am excited to talk about this film. It's funny because I reached out to you about this, reading your review about it, and how we were kinda on the same wavelength on at least on my first watch, where I thought and for anyone, I mean, this will be prefaced in the intro, but this is a John Ford film.
Mhm.
So and it's one of the biggest John Ford films for sure, most well-known films, but if you're someone who's watched a lot of John Ford films, you'll know that some of his movies can be just straight up boring, and I remember thinking this film took a long time and took a lot out of me, and it felt a lot longer on the first watch, but I just couldn't get over how beautiful it looked. At that point, I knew Arthur C. Miller's name when I first watched it because I watched it for the first time, I think maybe last year. But I remember on your review, you also mentioned that you didn't love the film, but you did think it
Mhm.
looked beautiful. That's why I wanted to ask you to be in this. I'm not sure if you rewatched it, but
Mhm.
how did you feel on a rewatch before we even get into his work?
Yeah, I think I had a similar experience probably as you of I did rewatch it for this, and the first time I'd watched it I was, you know, just trying to get through like a lot of movies. I was
Yeah.
doing like a deep dive into movie history, and so it was just sort of checking off the box of okay, I've seen this, the John Ford's one that won Best Picture and beat Citizen Kane or whatever, but it didn't make a huge impression on me that time. Um, and then rewatching with a more careful watch, knowing that I was going to be covering for this did bring out some different elements and got me thinking a little bit more about the themes and what it's trying to
Mhm.
do. And it's very, you know, gentle and pastoral, like a lot of
Mhm.
John Ford movies are. But I think there's some there's some richness to the themes that I do respond to. I think, yeah, like you said, the visuals are sort of the best part of
Mhm.
this, and was able, because I knew we were going to be talking about this from a visual perspective, to sort of think a little bit more about technique and what's going on in terms of how this is shot and how it's accomplishing sort of building the world. So I did, I think, respond a little bit more on the second watch to what the film was trying to do. So I think I have a, you know, I'm not, it's not my favorite John Ford movie or my favorite Arthur C. Miller movie either,
Mhm.
but I do think I respond to what the film's doing and have a little bit more positive things to say about it this time around.
No, I agree. I found myself being like, "Oh, I'm enjoying this a lot more." Is it my favorite John Ford? Absolutely not. And it's still not even necessarily my favorite Miller film, only
Mhm.
because not that I would never rewatch this again. I probably would,
Mhm.
but it would be a longer gap before
Yeah.
I rewatch it.
What would you say your favorite John Ford movie is?
That's a good question. You know what? I really liked one that I watched a couple years back. It was called The Three Godfathers?
The Three Godfathers. Oh, yeah. I haven't seen this one.
This is like an I don't even know if it's early. I need to actually check to see what year it is, but it's
1948.
yeah, so this one it's like no spoilers to anyone.
Mhm.
So it actually would be. It's not even an early one. But it is a John Wayne film, and it's John Wayne when he gets to be subdued. He's not playing the macho John Wayne. I would love to do, and I say this in, I mean, this episode will air after I do this in film club, but I brought up, we should watch The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and a lot of people either hadn't seen it
Great one.
or were
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't like John Wayne. I was like, that's fair.
Yeah.
But John Wayne, I've been watching this past year a lot of John Wayne, and I have an appreciation for his craft. And I know that's difficult to say because he obviously was a problematic person, but I think the character John Wayne is better than the actor, the human being who played John Wayne.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, he plays something very soft in this, and it's three men who come across a woman who's pregnant. She passes in childbirth, and they take care of a child. And they're in the desert, and it sounds so silly, but like it's so beautiful. I it's like
Hmm.
one of kind of like a forgotten one, but I really, really like that one. So right now I would consider that one of my favorites for sure. Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, probably. I mean, Liberty Valance is incredible, but
Yeah.
I think My Darling Clementine is probably my favorite. I really do
Yeah.
respond to the Henry Fonda ones. I think he's
I love
perfect
Henry.
for what John Ford is doing. So, yeah, My Darling Clementine is it's just so every moment of that is just like this is perfect. Yep.
Definitely a huge Fonda fan. So eventually I will do a Ford series, but I do think it will require probably more than 1 month because he has such a huge, huge filmography to do. So this is my first Ford in this, but we did briefly mention that this is considered by many as one of the best shot films of all time, and Arthur C. Miller did win the Oscar for this film, and it was his first Oscar, and he goes on to win 2 more after this. He had been nominated once before this for The Rains Came, which I haven't seen yet, but overall, he's been nominated for 6. As we always mention on the show, the Oscars don't always get it right, but I still take a little bit of I think in this era they do get it a lot better than they have in recent years. I can't think of any film from that year that would have beat this in terms of cinematography.
People are going to fight you on that. This is the Citizen Kane year. Yeah.
I'm sure they will, and to be
Yeah.
honest, I don't even want to get into Citizen Kane, to be honest, but I do need to rewatch that movie. I haven't seen it in a long time. I just remember not loving it when I first watched it, but I think I was just being kind of I haven't seen it since I was a teenager.
Got it.
I think I was just being haughty about it.
It depends what you're trying to award, because if you're trying
I
to
know.
award innovation and change, like it's just undeniable that Citizen Kane, with the way it uses deep focus and frames thing, was so fresh and new versus How Green With My Valley, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but this is using it's not and a lot of old Hollywood movies are like this where it's color inside the lines, but coloring
Mhm.
inside the lines can be very good. So, it's not like a Max Ophuls getting really crazy with the crane or anything like that. Like
Mhm.
those types of films are very rare in old Hollywood. But inside the boundaries of how things were shot in a standard way for a reason, and within the boundaries of what you can do with that, you can make something really beautiful. And so this would be an example more of that than really innovating to my eye, at least.
No, I agree. I don't know that he's not reinventing the wheel for sure in this film. I think he's just using the wheel in such a beautiful way as opposed to it being flat. And it's interesting because this
Mhm.
film, the story is adapted from a novel, so there's it's pre-existing work, but because of that, how the Hollywood system used to work, a novel would be bought by the rights would be bought by a studio, and they're like kind of just auctioning off to whoever a director. So originally it was supposed to be shot by William Wyler, who is like probably my second favorite director of all time. So reading that was interesting to me because I think the stuff with Wyler, his most known stuff is very much kind of like this. Stuff like The Best Years of Our Lives,
Yeah,
that
family
feels very
drama.
much,
Yep.
yeah, like this, and he definitely could have done something beautiful with it, and I would like to see his version of it. But the version that Zanuck, who the producer wanted to make, is that he essentially wanted to make his own Gone with the Wind, and he wanted to make this a 4-hour epic in Technicolor. And when
Mm.
you watch this movie, it's really one I'm glad it's shocking kind of that this movie's under 2 hours. It's just under 2 hours, but it feels, especially on the first watch, longer than that. On the second watch, once you know what's happening with this family, with the purposes, it goes by a lot quicker, I think. And I didn't feel the 2 hours like I did the first time. But making this a 4-hour epic is sounds kind of insane to me, but I don't know, maybe Wyler could have done something with it. I also think that this being a minor story and a Welsh family and they're Welsh people with Welsh accents is not just like, oh, they're American actors, which a lot of them were, just putting on American accents, pretending to be Welsh. I think this requires black and white and it brings out the emotion and the seriousness of everything. I'm wondering how you feel about the idea that this was originally supposed to be not just in color, but Technicolor.
Yeah, it's hard to know how that would have played, it does stick
Yeah.
out, having a color in the title of the movie and then there's
I
no
know.
green. There's no green in the movie. But, it does bring out something in these images to have it shot in black and white that I think is really beautiful. So it's impossible to know, what it would be like if it was Technicolor, but I think with it being a period piece, and looking back at a time and going for this more pastoral and it just feels sort of comfy,
Mhm.
with the black and white cinematography. So I think it suits the material really well, color in the title notwithstanding.
I know, and it's funny because the minute you brought that up, it like flashed back to like one of their letterbox reviews that I read, so I had to like pull it up as you were talking. And I usually don't love. Sometimes I like jokey reviews. I
Yeah.
don't love when they're the top review of a film, but this happens to be the top review of this one, and it's the person saying the movie is black and white, so unfortunately I couldn't see how green his valley was. Which I usually would hate, but it did make me laugh, so kudos, I
Yeah.
guess, to them.
There's something though to imagining the color and that they're
Mhm.
creating it's creating color through how it's framed and how it's told, the music. It feels very vibrant despite not having that color. And so
Yeah.
it's a little bit of playing on what we're imagining versus what we're actually seeing that I think works. It works well for the movie, and movies are all about, you're showing certain things, you're not showing other things, and letting the audience imagine actually makes people lean in and engage. And so
Mhm.
that we are the the vibrancy is created through other elements rather than being literally what we see. I think it works.
I think it works too, especially because as far as I know, Miller wasn't involved when Wyler was supposed to shoot this, so he came on with Ford. And Miller is known for his black and white work. He has shot in color. And I tried to think about when I did the series, do I include a color film just for contrast? And there's two reasons why I didn't. One, because I just think his black and white work is more compelling. And two, because the two other directors that I've done so far on this series are very much known for their colors. So that was Gordon Willis and Robbie Mueller. So I wanted to show a cinematographer his known for his black and white work. But also when John Ford came on, due to the war and, like, the after effects of the war, they were supposed to shoot this actually on location in Wales, and they just couldn't. It was like, you couldn't shoot there. So they just shot it on lots in California. And I think if John Ford had gotten to be able to shoot on location, the color could have worked. But I think, with sets and having Miller on, and I just think Ford's sensibility and knowing his family history, even though he's Irish, he's not Welsh,
Mhm.
but I think this felt very close to people he knew in his family. It just felt like the seriousness that black and white often adds felt fitting to me. And again, I'm sure it would have been a
Mhm.
great film in color, but I'm always down for some beautiful shadows
Yeah.
and lighting in black and white. I'll never be against that. That's for sure.
The being shot on a soundstage, stuck out to me as well, and the artificiality, but how that can be a benefit in some cases of, like, especially there's one scene where I think it's where Roddy McDowall is, like, learning to walk again with Walter Pidgeon, and you can tell, it's painted backdrop, there's no depth there, but it's so beautiful, and
I
I
know.
think there's some element of the artificiality that can be very, like, beautiful and painterly, where you're seeing something that's actually it's not, it's been made by human hands, and they've
Mhm.
crafted this backdrop, and there's an art to it, versus, if you're shooting on location, you're seeing the actual thing, which obviously can be great as well, but it adds a different element, and it's not always a bad thing to have that sort of artificiality, but that's been made by artists. I think can be beneficial and also quite beautiful.
I remember the first time watching this, didn't know anything about it. I remember being like, "There's no way this town looks like this."
Yeah.
And then, watching stuff like I watched The Quiet Man after that, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I see what you're doing." Um,
Hmm.
I couldn't help thinking, and it's hard not to talk about this film and just talk about Miller because it is very much, it feels so much a John Ford film. But I couldn't help thinking of The Quiet Man and how different that film is, even though it feels like it could somewhat live in the same universe, even though this is Ireland and this is Wales. But it's very much, talking about people in a small village and their everyday lives and what they go through and their interpersonal relationships. But that's shot in color. I don't love The Quiet Man. I know that's another
Hmm.
huge Ford
I
film.
don't I don't either. Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't resonate with it at all. I don't know what it was about it. I just didn't like it. To to be fully honest, I prefer this one, and I think maybe maybe it would have worked a little bit better for me in black and white, that film, than this does. Um, it's funny because that cinematographer worked on The Three Godfathers.
Ah.
But I do wanna kinda talk about there's so many beautiful shots in this film
Hmm.
and the composition of the frames, and this is, Ford and Miller working together, and they were very good friends, they knew each other, and they worked really well together, I think. I think that Ford can be sometimes a very clinical director and very straightforward, and that's why when he works with really good cinematographer, it brings out the warmth in him, and I think that's what comes out here because this feels very matter of a fact, the storytelling, but there are times where there's warmth that comes through, and I think it also has a part in the actors too. I think Roddy McDowall really is a huge, beautiful part of this film. I also love Walter Pidgeon and Maureen O'Hara also in this film. and rewatching it, I had a better appreciation for the other characters. But there's some shots where it just feels like they took the time to be like, everyone needs to stand here. This is how we're shooting it. Nothing in this film feels like they improvised at all. Sometimes that can feel overwhelming when you feel like everything was thought through and you can sense the thought. And here you can sense it, but it feels like, I don't know, to me, I had a really huge appreciation for like, wow, they actually took the time to compose this shot. That's like 10 seconds. And
Yeah.
it probably took so long to do that. How do you feel about that? Because sometimes I know people complain when it feels like the cinematography or shot composition overtakes the story. And I think both said that the visuals really kind of drives it, but it never to me feels like it's overtaking or overwhelming.
I think it's that we think about these things as separate elements and their different roles on the film set, and so we try to like break it into its disparate parts, but these things
Hmm.
are all integrated to create something. And so what the cinematography for me does, and the blocking like you mentioned, and lots of shots from a medium distance that are fitting a lot of people into the frame. It adds to this sense of, we've got this framing device of we're looking in the past from a place of family and community. And so being able to see all of these people interact in the same frame is really important to build like what our main character Hugh is remembering about this time and what was good about it. So seeing all of these minors together, seeing them interact in the same frame, I think works really well for we are seeing a group of people rather than just one perspective, and that's what's special about it. So I think it really a tool that creates a full movie and experience rather than a distraction.
Yeah. It always feels like this is like an actual village with all these people who have a part. And even if you don't ever get to meet them individually, they stand out. Because I even think of funeral scenes or even when they're marching towards the mines and all those like little points that stick out. And everything feels very tight. And I do want to bring this up kind of in the last segment because that's part of the one trademark that I have. But just being able to shoot in close proximity with all these people and it never feels overwhelming is definitely a skill. I also think that Ford films often have such a
Hmm.
huge amount of huge cast and a lot of extras, which there's definitely a lot of extras in this film. But
Hmm.
there are so many different tones in this film, I think.
The other thing that's interesting in terms of the communal element is how the
Mhm.
big mining company interacts with that and tries to separate them. So you've got scenes where they're getting paid and finding out what their wages are, and they're all individual. So in other parts of the movie, they're a big community, they're singing together, and they're sort of united as a group. But then this mining company is very much one at a time, one at a time. We're going to see the individuals come up to this window, and each person is an individual unit who becomes almost less human in their individuality, and how they're treated. So that's captured really well, and it's usually, you've got a static shot, one person coming up at a time to this window or coming
Mhm.
through a gate, and certain people get stopped while others get let through. So there's this division and separation that's happening that's also captured very well in the film.
I thought about that shot also because I rewatched it again,
Hmm.
just kinda skimming certain shots, that stood out, and that one stood out because I remember when Hugh gets his wages and then his brothers get, essentially dismissed, laid off, dismissed, I don't know
Hmm.
what it would be at that time. But the communal shots are great because sometimes it's not just, people gathered in a room. I think of one of the earlier shots on the playground, and it's not the first time he gets beat up, but it's the second time when the kids are kind of holding hands in a circle and they're circling them because the two of them are gonna have a fight.
Yeah.
This seems very intense to have like a circle fight like this,
Yeah.
with a group of people watching. But those shots are very interesting because I think, and to me, it's funny that Ford was got such a great performance out of McDowell. Not that McDowell wouldn't have done it on his own, but he just doesn't seem like someone who would be good with kids, to
Yeah.
be honest. And he's gets like really good performances out of those kids, and there's a warmth to those scenes, even if it's intense that, the kids are beating each other up or the teacher's beating the kids. There's a warmth to those scenes, so there's communication between Ford and Miller of how to tackle those type of scenes because they know people watching it in this era, the era that it was released in. Not that that wasn't happening then, but it would be different. So people are going to be like a little triggered by seeing, a teacher beat the hell out of a
Yeah.
child. There's so many tonal shifts that never feel jarring because even the romance scenes between O'Hara and Pigeon, those have a different look to them too. And I find that often they're alone, the two of them.
Hmm.
We do get scenes where they're with the broader crowd, but the scenes with them two alone, I find that it's lit. There's one scene in particular I think of, they're by their like her front door and it's lit by just a lamp. And they're talking very seriously and closely together, and it feels very beautiful and intimate. And then like, the next scene is a very intense mining scene. Um
Yeah.
which is a lot. I think that's why a lot of people don't love this film on first watch because there's really a lot happening in this film. It feels a little overwhelming on the first watch, which is why I'm a huge advocate for rewatches of certain films. Some ones that you didn't dislike on the first watch, but you're like, with time I'll probably appreciate it a bit better. But it helps that it looks beautiful. Wondering if you have any scenes that stuck out to you that you'd wanna
Hmm.
chat about before we get into just what he did right before and after this one?
Yeah, a couple of sort of the techniques that stood out to me, the other part of the title other than the greenness is the valley, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of using height, looking up or down to convey authority or smallness. So particularly um the scene where Walter Pigeon is sort of rebuking all of his congregation members is shot very much up at him to convey his authority in that moment. And you see a lot of that to contrast uh class as well, or just different ideas of when someone is feeling small or when they are feeling, big. I think of what as well of Beth getting up to address everybody, and you're looking up at her as she's trying to convey. So anytime that like the film is trying to convey a message of like this is the point of view that you should be responding to, that person is like elevated literally. And so I like that as a way to convey that person's authority. So that definitely stood out as I was watching through.
No, I love that. I mean, I love that technique in general. I always find it very amusing,
Yeah.
because we really don't do that anymore. The only people I can think of who might do it are like the Coen brothers who would
Yeah.
do something like that. And it's always amusing to me. And I think that we should bring it back because we love an undershot. It's definitely shot more. It's not as crass as I make it out to
Yeah.
be. It's a way more beautiful than that. Um, it's one of those movies that it feels like you need to watch it to really appreciate it, and we can talk about it forever. But
Hmm.
the next time I would want to see this, I would like to see it in a cinema. like, I think that's the next time I need to watch it. If it's playing here in Toronto, I'll be like, yeah, I will watch this because I think that'll be such a great experience for sure. But I do want to talk about what he did. I'll talk about it briefly, what Arthur C. Miller did right before this and right after. So technically, all these movies are 1941 releases, but the way cinematographers can definitely do a lot more films than directors can because a lot of times they're hopping on a set and they're hopping off and they're going to the next job, especially back then where they were just, pumping out films more so
Yep.
than they are now. So these are all 1941 films. What he does right before this, as you mentioned, Manhunt by Fritz Lang. This also actually is starring Walter Pidgeon, and Roddy McDowall has a little role in it too. In a nutshell, it's about a hunter who happens to kind of stumble across Hitler's vacation home
Yeah.
and dabbles with the idea of should I assassinate him? I know you've seen it. I haven't watched it yet because no spoilers, but there is a reason why I want to save it for another project upcoming.
Mhm.
But you've seen it. Do you have brief thoughts
Yeah,
on the film?
it's very different in what Lang is going for versus what Ford is going for, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that Arthur C. Miller it really is a distinct visual identity in
Mm-hmm.
Manhunt. It's almost more Hitchcockian. Their set pieces, sort of chase sequences, or a lot of action, and it does feel very distinct. So that stood out to me in terms of the versatility of what Arthur C. Miller was doing in each film, and them being in such close succession, but saying, okay, this is what this film is going for versus what this other one is going for. It was impressive. So that was the main takeaway for me, at least.
Yeah, and it's also shot in black and white.
Yes.
What I can say from so I actually didn't mention in this episode, but I mentioned in the last episode, I'm currently in the midst of reading a book that was co-written by Arthur C. Miller and Fred Balshofer, who was his mentor. And they don't really talk about the films that they made as they became more known people. They talk about their beginnings, which is great if you're interested in film history, especially kind of from a cinematographer's lens. I highly, highly recommend it. It's been so interesting. It's a short enough book, but it's really interesting to read about how closely knit directors and cinematographers were. And I think they still are, but they're nowadays kind of talking about or talked about so separately as opposed to like a unit working towards the same goal. And I bring up the book. It's called One Reel a Week. And it was released by the University of California Press. So I got like a weird, oddly enough, I bought a used copy from the UK. It was a library copy that they were selling. That's been great. I bring it up because he talks about, again, how he couldn't do his job if he's not fully in line with the director's vision. And it's interesting you bring up how different it looks in this because Fritz Lang is a completely different director than
Oh
John
yeah.
Ford. So, so different. And it'd be weird if he was trying to shoot Manhunt like the way he shot How Green Is My Valley, because it doesn't call for that. So I think he's a great adapter, and that's what makes for a great cinematographer. I think there are cinematographers who definitely have trademarks, and we've talked about this in previous, series, and I kind of will talk about this in the last segment, but I think that Miller was so good at just being like, "Okay, what do you need from me, and how can I adapt my skills to your vision and this story?" So that's great that he does that in Manhunt, and then he goes on to How Great Is My Valley, wins an Oscar, obviously after he would have shot this following film, which is The Men in Her Life by a director called Gregory Radoff, but who I don't know. I don't know this film, and I'd like to watch it. I haven't seen it, but it's a period drama about a circus ballerina and her romantic life, and I think it was nominated for sound design, and it's well known for well, not well known, but it's known at the time for its grandiose sets because they were made by this huge Russian
Hmm.
um, artist, and so he had a huge hand in that. So I would like to watch it because I do like those period dramas. And it's Joan Bennett in it. The only copies I saw online to watch happened to be like Russian, and they were just in Russian. I was like, well, I haven't gotten well versed in Russian yet to watch that, so I'd like to try and find a copy. But that's what he does after, and I think what the his more known like films, if we look at all, even the films that I'm talking about in this series, they're all period pieces. You know, something even like The Gunfighter, that's a period piece because it's not set in the time that it was released. So that's what I think his forte was, looking at a past time. And his early career with Balshofer, they mostly made westerns. So that's the before and after for Miller, in terms of How Green Is My Valley. But for the last segment, trademarks, I always find it tricky with cinematographers because we just talked about how a good cinematographer should be able to adapt
Hmm.
to a director. But one that I have noticed just from watching his films previous to the series and watching, that I would like to get your thoughts on, are his ability to shoot indoors. When I talk about indoors, I mean like home spaces and getting characters in home spaces. If I compare it to the last film I would have covered, Dragonwick, which is shot in this big castle, this film is shot either a lot of times in their home, the mines, church, and sometimes like the pub, which is
Hmm.
all very enclosed spaces. When I think about their home, the family home, the ceilings are so low. I don't even know if these actors are tall, but it makes them seem very big. But it never feels claustrophobic to me. It just feels so homey. It feels like this is where this family actually lives, even though you only see a couple of rooms. A lot of his best films, in my opinion, even something like The Gunfighter, which is again often shot indoors, like in a pub or bar, he's very good at making things feel comfortable. I wonder if you have any thoughts about the indoor shooting of this
Yeah,
film.
it does feel comfortable. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of them in a relatively small house, but
Mhm.
I think to them, um, it doesn't feel crowded or cramped in an unpleasant way. They want to be with each other, and despite maybe their differences in ideology or opinion, they are engaged in this family and this community. And so Arthur C. Miller is able to capture that. And I'd imagine that it'd be pretty difficult to capture in a cramped space while not making it feel uncomfortable. But that does come across, and so it's impressive for sure.
It really is. And even a lot of the mine shots, there's a couple I'm thinking of specifically. There's one where Hugh, he's on a working day and I guess he's pushing a cart and the cart's following him. He's basically enclosed by darkness, and you want to feel sorry for Hugh for having to work, but you're also kind of proud of him to
Yeah.
be like, he's out there, he's doing something, it was his choice. He didn't have to. Everyone gave him multiple outs to do it. And I think that's such a beautiful shot. It's also great work by Roddy McDowell, who is just so good in this.
Hmm.
And I don't know, this is a side note, but did you not, both times I watched this, I was like, he looks like Anna Paquin a lot. The piano. I was like, they have the same face. If
Yeah,
anyone's watching
I
this
could
has
see
seen the
it.
piano, I'm like, they look like they could be siblings. But there's also another shot where, one of the sons, he has an accident down in the mines and they bring him up. And it felt like there's no way PTA didn't watch. I'm sure he's a huge fan of films. He's seen this film and it felt like stuff he did in There'll Be Blood. I felt a lot of, you know, was, transferred over to that. And he definitely, I don't know if he's ever talked about it. Probably should have looked it up. That he, watched this film prior to shooting There'll Be Blood because there's a lot of shots that I'm like, this seems like it's directly lifted from this film. Um, anything that we haven't chatted about before I ask you what your double bill is?
I don't think so. I think we covered it, other than
Yeah.
just I really love Beth and her character. So off topic from the cinematography, but that she is a little she's pretty sassy. She talks back to her husband a lot, but they have a good
Yep.
relationship, and that so it's a good example of like, different ways that marriages can work and be successful. So I really love her character, and it feels maybe a little bit progressive for the
Hmm.
40s of like, okay, there are different ways that marriages can work and operate, and that can be okay.
I mean, it feels definitely progressive because there's a couple times where she just offhand makes a remark, being like, "I'd like to punch him in the face," or "I'd like to," she says, "I'm not doing this," or not, and
Yeah.
whatnot. And I think it's great, and she's the actress,
Sarah Algood.
fantastic in it. So, you know, it might not be either of our favorite John Ford film or Miller film, but there are great elements overall that, it would be difficult not to appreciate, and I know we both do, and I think it'd be one that we would never, or I'll speak for myself, I would never dissuade anyone from watching this film. I would definitely recommend you watch other Ford films first leading up to it
Yeah.
so that you have a better appreciation for it, but I think it's great, and I think it would be difficult not to do a month on Arthur C. Miller without talking about it because this is the film he's probably most known for. But I do have one more question for you, and it's
Yeah.
if you're gonna make a double bill for this film, and it's always tricky making a double bill with a film that is almost 2 hours, but, you have people like ourselves who will double bill a film like this. What are you pairing this with if you have an option or more options, and why are you pairing those 2 films together?
Yeah, I love the theoretical double bill because then I don't have to worry so much about runtime and people actually sitting through it. So that's as someone who now programs these things and has to think about like, oh well, if I pair this 40-minute short with this 100-minute movie, like, are people gonna hang out for that long? Are they gonna be shifting around in their seats or whatever? So I've paired with another feature length, but
Mhm.
my pick for this was Harlan County, USA, which is
Okay.
it's a documentary about another coal miners strike in Harlan County, Kentucky, cinema verite, directed by Barbara Koppel. And How Green Is My Valley has unions, it has a strike, but it's a very gentle film
Mhm.
about those things. And I think the company, there is some critique of this mining company and their power over the citizens, but it doesn't really have a whole lot of an edge to it. I think that's fine for what the movie's doing, and not all movies need to have that edge to it. But if I
Mhm.
was looking to pair with something, I would pair with something that is similar but does have that edge to it. And there's the company like hires these thugs, and it turns into like these are battles where they're shooting back and forth. And so it'd be a really interesting contrast of the different ways that these coal miners strikes can go, but also pairs with it in unique ways. The roles of women in the strike are a neat complement. and just very different style. Completely, cinema verite is a completely different way of shooting as well, something like this. And so I think there's interesting comparison and contrast potential in the double bill.
Oh no, that's great. And it's a great reminder because it's been on my list for so long to watch. So I definitely am gonna bump that up. I think that's a great compare and contrast. I think it's good for a double bill, and I think it's one that you could actually do as a double bill as opposed to what I'm gonna propose here. um and again, I'm glad that you brought up theoretical double bill. I'm not
It-
actually expecting anyone to ever do this. As I was rewatching it, I thought about a film that I know that a lot of people don't love. I love it, and I was thinking about there's a long preface to it, but I was thinking about, Ford's family history and him of being of Irish descent and how this film, when I originally watched it, How Green Is My Valley, I didn't do any research on it. And I was like, what's this accent? I couldn't figure it out. I was like, it doesn't sound Irish, doesn't sound British. And then finding out it was Welsh. And I was like wondering what it would be like if he had done this story in Ireland, like he's done a lot of times, knowing that obviously this is based on a novel and whatnot. But I thought about another Irish epic by David Lean called Ryan's Daughter. Now, anyone who's seen Ryan's Daughter is probably going to roll their eyes and be like, really? It's one, it's 3 hours long. And two, it's not loved at all. But I love it. You get to see Robert Mitchum, you get to hear Robert Mitchum doing an Irish accent. Is it good? That's up to you to decide. But I think it's a great film. I loved every minute of that movie, and it feels like it could be a sister film to this. The topics are not even remotely similar, but they're shot in small towns, small knit communities, and we're going through their lives, what they do for work, romantic affiliations, and whatnot. And it just feels like if you're looking for something that's similar to this, similar energy, but it's also shot in color because, Freddie Young, who shot that, did a lot of David Lean, and he was known for his big picture in color. Um, if you're like, maybe this is what How Green Is My Valley could look like if it'd be shot in color, if you're curious. So that would be my double bill that I, again, don't expect anyone to do. If you do it, good on you. I don't know if I could. That's 5 hours.
Hey, watch them one night after another. Yeah. You take a little break. Yeah.
There's no rules to the double bill. You can do it how you want, but I think it would make a good pairing. Because I think David Lean and John Ford, again, they're not similar, but I think a lot of their films could make good pairings. I think they have huge thoughts and they make very big movies, just in very different ways. So that would be what I would pair with this. So yeah, I don't know. Have you seen much
I
David Lean?
I've seen some, but I have not seen Ryan's Daughter.
Most people
I'm like
haven't.
six or seven.
I mean, if you look at the reviews, people are gonna be like, I'm the only person who's given it like 5 stars, probably. Um, but yeah, this is great, Brian. I was so glad to chat out this movie. I think I'm always interested. I usually do films on this podcast that I absolutely adore. So it's always interesting to me to talk about a film that I enjoy, but I don't love. Like I wouldn't say that I love this movie. I enjoyed it. I think it brings out a very interesting conversation, and you're a great person to do it with. So I'm glad that we had this time to chat about the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Seeing Faces in Movies is an official podcast of the Royal Film Club. It's hosted and edited by Felicia, with intro music by Lamar Walker. If you like what you heard, let us know at seeingfacesmovies.com or send us an email at seeingfacemovies@gmail.com. And while you're at it, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to your podcast. Watch more movies, and we'll catch you next time.